Hey, how you doing? My name is Mason Merrill, here to talk with you about the astrology of March. We're going to get into all the transits, all the aspects from the planets, talk about the ingresses as well as the upcoming eclipse that we're going to get into. So if you like my content, if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe to my Patreon. It really supports me, helps me make these videos. So let's dive into this. All right, let's get into the first aspect of the month on March 1st. The Sun in Pisces sextiles Jupiter in Taurus. So we've been kind of dealing with that Saturn-Sun configuration for some time with Mercury hanging out there. Hard work and no play makes the Sun a dull boy. So the Sun's kind of reaching out to Jupiter for a little bit of support, a little bit of stability, a little bit of fun, a little bit of pleasure, kind of enlivening the Sun's spirit in a lot of ways. Juxtaposing our work, the limits that we do, and what we need to get done, who is helping us, as well as balancing themes of learning from our own enemy. You know, the Sun and Saturn, they both have enmity, so there is this kind of need to acknowledge, okay, these are our limits, this is how far maybe my life goes, but at the same time, I can't kind of constrain myself. I can't bottleneck my own support system. I can't bottleneck my own light just because I don't want this person to see it. I don't want that person to see what I'm doing, so that it'll stop me from interacting with the group at large. And sometimes with this aspect from Saturn and the Sun, there's a little bit of shallowness to attention to detail, which can corrupt the actual nature of who we are and what it means to be human. Kind of wanting ourselves to be wholly formulaic, wholly integrated in kind of our morals. But with that, we're also very fallible. We're humans, so we have to kind of let go of trying to bottleneck our growth so that we can constrain some forces that we're opposing, right? So with this, we have some opportunities from Jupiter to help us kind of see things from a little bit more of a perspective, and to reintroduce those channels which we want our energy to flow through, we want our connections to flow through, so that we can engage with life, be happy, do the things that we want to do, have fun, enjoy things. By doing this, we can kind of acknowledge our limits, acknowledge the limits of our growth and expansion, and stay connected. You know, work through issues and don't give up. If the wells run dry, we still need to believe in another life. We still need to believe that even if things end, even if the sky falls with fire, we need to believe that we will see each other on the other side and we will get to a better moment. So, yeah, this aspect I think is somewhat good. Saturn's kind of alignment here reminds us that we need to enjoy life. We need to enjoy the connections that we can create. As much as maybe we run into people that don't agree with the light that we introduce into our lives, into other people's lives, we still have to be happy. We still have to enjoy that. We still have to enjoy the process of getting to where we want to go. So yeah, I think this is going to be interesting. Don't kind of constrain so much of the connections that you have at this moment. Let things go. Allow yourself to feel free. Allow yourself to reintroduce the good things that you want to have in life. Don't, constrain things too much to be focused in this one area of how you express yourself. All right, so let's get into the Venus in Aquarius square Uranus in Taurus aspect on March 3rd. Jupiter is also in Taurus and rules over everything in Pisces, which is where Saturn is, and Saturn rules everything that's in Aquarius. So we kind of see Venus as the final dispositor in this case, meaning that Venus has a lot more effect to challenge things than we may notice on a surface level. The moon is also in Sagittarius here, speaking more towards that Venusian need to rewrite things, especially because Jupiter rules Sagittarius, so there is kind of this idea that the moon is carrying that light, especially for Venus, because Jupiter is in Taurus, Venus is home. So here we're seeing Venus break the rules of convention, rewriting the script, transforming the narrative, breaking the rules. Uranus can a lot of times suggest certain issues that kind of come to a boiling point, certain highs and lows that we may go through, and then acknowledging that and wanting to kind of deal with that, take that head on, right? So Venus is wanting to rewrite the story and tell a different story with passion through grassroots movement of Aquarius, appealing to the collective. There's some unpredictability with this aspect, unpredictability with relational dynamics, especially with Mars being not too far away in Aquarius as well. So disruptions on the consensus, that layer of society, kind of rippling and echoing through other layers of society, igniting a shift that affects a lot and is felt by many. Finances and personal values as it bears its weight on expectations untold and unseen, reaching towards a more authentic way to express ourselves around relationships and creative pursuits. You know, it's kind of like Venus is kind of saying, you know what? Nobody's gonna get in my golden chariot. I'm doing this. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm fucking fuck around and find out. You know, treat me however, and you're gonna find that I'm not gonna just let that happen. So with this aspect, Venus is she's trying to do her thing, and there's some people that are like, maybe like, okay, Venus, turn down your music. This is a little bit too revolutionary. But she's not interested in that. She's not here to hear about that. She's wishing to create, express, and supply. Yeah, so here Venus is kind of turning up her music loud. She's kind of saying, you know what? I want some culture. I want to cultivate a little bit different than this. I want something to happen from this. And other people may want to kind of, okay, well, this is a little bit too loud. But that kind of motivates Venus to keep going. That kind of motivates her to kind of say, you know what? And actually, you telling me to turn down my music is nothing that I need to hear. Venus recognizes that people may want to turn down our music, may want to turn down our culture, may want to turn down what we're trying to pump out, what we're trying to cultivate. But that's what also keeps us committed to what we love and what we wish to express, create, and supply ourselves with. Venus is kind of acknowledging, okay, so you're trying to tell me that I can't have these tools of Prometheus, I can't engage with this, I can't raise myself up. Well, watch me. Venus is also getting ready to go into Pisces. So, yeah, Venus has kind of got a long story to tell with that as well. That's going to be where the first eclipse happens. Venus will be pretty close to an aspect with Saturn and Jupiter there. And for a lot of planets, she is deciding exactly what agendas are being pushed forward. And here she is taking things into her own hands to say no to the common agenda, taking care of shit no one else will, fighting for the commoner and seeking reform, especially through means of consensus, especially through means of how we engage in relationships, our values, and what we want for our own personal lives. All right, so let's talk about the next aspect, which is on March 4th. This is Mercury in Pisces, sextile Uranus in Taurus. And at the same time, Mercury is also coming up on a conjunction with Neptune. So penetrating thoughts and deepness, the stillness that Saturn bears makes Mercury step out of the rhythm, while Mercury touches the waters of Neptune and Uranus as well. Dreamy-like thinking that wishes to make itself useful in the name of intuition, divination, and games that Mercury likes to play. These kind of games of intuition, of divination as well, that allow us to see a little bit more of the broader picture. Unconventional ideas and stimulations seep out of Mercury. He kind of puts this on the megaphone and announces himself with artful creations, inspirations, and rhetoric. Believing rather than putting all of the dots in connection. Inspired ways of communication that seem to make no sense until Mercury has time to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And then on March 8th, Mercury conjoins Neptune. Mercury is baptized in the waters of Neptune and comes out fully sensitized to the divine. This blurring of the Neptunian waters gives Mercury a loudspeaker to say things off the cuff. This aspect, I think, can be a little bit disillusioning, especially with that Saturn-Neptune configuration that's going on in Pisces as well. The Saturn-Sun cazimi is now letting everything become somewhat exposed. And here with Mercury conjoined to Neptune, this kind of poses a difficulty with presenting information in a way that can be interpreted. This is kind of an aspect for things getting misinterpreted, misunderstood, for kind of drunk ramblings of Mercury, so to speak. Poetic nature and idealism takes full reign here. And while this is not good for taxes and getting shit done, we've got tax season coming up here in the United States. So this is a better aspect for kind of relaxing, getting lost in information, consuming the cup of distraction. I also think that with this aspect, it's kind of illusions that are kind of being presented to us. Mercury and Neptune can kind of represent a sort of propaganda, kind of disseminating that into the masses, and images being distorted somewhat. Don't trust AI and what you see online. Not everything that speaks to the intellect can be trusted. This is somewhat of an escapism aspect, to be honest. So just be kind of cautious of those things that kind of present itself, the information that's presented on your doorstep. Be a little bit more willing to kind of play with it. Be a little bit more willing to kind of see the laughter in it. Mercury is a trickster. So maybe playing with that in a way that can sometimes distort what's actually going on, can distort the information that is actually relevant to us. So yeah, just be aware of that. This is kind of a better aspect for escapism, getting into creative endeavors, kind of maybe not finely detailing things, but just throwing things against the wall, kind of seeing, okay, what does this paint for me? What am I seeing here? You know. All right, so let's get into the next aspect on March 9th. And this is actually kind of a group of aspects on March 9th, as well as a new moon that follows the next day on March 10th. So the first aspect is between Mars and Uranus. Mars squares Uranus in Taurus. Mars is in Aquarius. We also have the ingress of Mercury into Aries. And on the same day, we also have the Sun sextiling Uranus as well. With this aspect from Mars to Uranus, there is kind of something that is being culled here. We had that Venus squared Uranus earlier, and so there's kind of like this repeat aspect. And Venus and Mars, they pair very well together. They're kind of two sides of opposites. So here we have Mars pushing towards chaotic reactions, or reacting maybe in a chaotic way. Mars is reaching towards the red button, kind of recognizing some of the established ways of doing things, and in a predictable and volatile way that pushes us to act and can force our hand to respond. And it's kind of interesting because we also see the Sun kind of echoing this, or kind of going towards that aspect with Uranus as well, to kind of highlight this. And then also Mercury ingressing into Aries is kind of acknowledging what Mars's agenda is pushing, and kind of reaching towards that as well. We're coming up on the lunar eclipse, the South Node lunar eclipse on the 25th. That won't be for a little bit, but this is kind of the calm before the storm in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways a little bit of a storm that we're getting into. So what to do with Mars on the neck of Prometheus, right? Volatility of Aquarius reaching a breaking point where something has to change. Disaster and war, but also innovation and revitalization of how we approach controlling our needs and desires, using the martial potential of healing. Mars is using some potentiality here, a little bit of a momentum to heal, and push comes to shove and we break through something, we break something down, to change and apprehend the difficulties using means of disruption. Acting out, challenging what's been established, quick action that can shake things up. Kind of that quick action that Mars kind of gets to Uranus, and then the Sun kind of echoes a little bit of that aspect as well, and trying to deal with that, trying to recognize, okay, what is this kind of Promethean new agenda? What are we reaching towards? What are we trying to create, take from the gods to create and have for ourselves? Mars is doing some lone wolf thinking that could lead to revolutionary acts of violence. stepping out of our comfort zone, as well as maybe someone else stepping out of their comfort zone. This may be coming from someone that no one would predict would do this, and taking matters into their own hands. Mars reshaping and taking justice and kind of what can I do with this? And in this moment, I think Mars kind of realizes that the quick action that can potentially shake things up may be a momentary victory, but at the same time, sometimes we need that push to get things started. We need that push to break up the agenda, to kind of reintroduce some sort of Promethean fire into what we're trying to create. To kind of, okay, well, I need to act, I need to figure this out, I need to decide for myself. Mars is very inceptive in his actions. Mars is going to start things, and sometimes, Mars is going to deal with things, and whether it comes to finishing them, sometimes Mars isn't too worried about that, but it's the initiation that Mars is really interested in. So here it's kind of Mars sparking something to reignite something, to take things into a different direction. And I think that direction is maybe echoing something from the Venus squared Uranus as well. All right, so on the same day, March 9th, we have Mercury ingressing into Aries. And I think that it's important to kind of highlight a little bit about Mercury and Aries, kind of what does that mean. So Mercury will be here for a while. Mercury will also retrograde to the sign. But how does Mercury and Aries kind of look like? Right? So Mercury is a little bit more of the planet that deals with how we get along with others, more so in the quality of friendship, more so in the quality of what information we bring to each other, how do we connect with each other really, how do we cooperate. Mercury is very invested in kind of connecting details, connecting people through various endeavors. All right, so let's kind of break this down. Let's talk about Mercury's ingress and kind of what that means transit-wise as it relates to the other planets, especially echoing that Mars square Uranus. So Aries is a sign that's very starting something new, that initiatory acts that we need to express ourselves. Kind of how do we align with our will? How do we align with our expression? How do we have confidence in starting these things, these inceptory acts that we engage with to kind of spark that newness of ourselves? Kind of like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Sometimes we get so far and then we kind of have to reignite that. We have to be born again in some way. Really like Aries. It's a sign that represents kind of the spectrum of Libra and Aries, and I think that it's also important to recognize that the North Node is also there. So a lot of this is maybe speaking towards a lot of those heights, a lot of those really high markations of how we engage with relationships, how we engage with our own, our own selfhood, really. So Mercury is announcing a little bit of the war and translating the influence of the Mars-Uranus square. Mercury will retrograde here, saying the quiet part out loud, being a bit of a loudspeaker for the big shakeups that will come from the eclipses looking ahead. Mercury will speak to a lot of the changes and translate the stories of the eclipses as well. It may feel like this is somewhat of the sealing of our stories in terms of relationships, in terms of where we want to go ourselves. So as far as climbing up, we need to sometimes reflect on maybe some of the battle scars that we've endured from engaging in the war that is kind of being ourselves, that is enacting our own selfhood, right? And talking about the challenges we face from fighting our own wars. So what stories of the battlefield dance across our minds and drive our intellect to react? How do we connect with others? How do we express our own personhood? What do we want? There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of new adventures that Mercury wants to take on. But sometimes that adventurous style of relating can be a little bit difficult in relationships. Sometimes we can be a little bit too direct. We can be a little bit too overbearing, overpowering to others with our mind, with our intellect. And that's something that I think Mercury struggles with. Mercury would rather cooperate, and sometimes we need to kind of express the boundaries of our own selfhood and acknowledge that, hey, this is part of me. Maybe this person that I'm trying to connect to is a little bit opposite from me. So I need to just kind of recognize, okay, where are my limits? Where am I trying to push towards? What is the ceiling, especially with Rahu there? Rahu kind of expresses the heights of what we can create, the heights of our humanity, but sometimes that's a little bit covered in the smoke and mirrors that Rahu creates himself. A little bit of the heretical nature of Rahu. So it's important to bear in mind to not be too overpowering, to express ourselves with the limits that we need to use in order to not cross the boundaries of other people, of other relationships. So you just keep that in mind with this aspect. Mercury is also kind of announcing a little bit of that Mars square Uranus aspect as well. Kind of how do we deal with this? How do we rectify some of the issues that we're trying to challenge? How do we really figure out the mind in order to get through the problems? Because sometimes, using our intellect can be a tool for us as well. So I think that that's important to remember with this aspect, to not take information too personally, to not take the relationships that we may entangle ourselves as meaning so much about us, but kind of recognizing where our limits are, recognizing, okay, this is my personhood. Maybe I can't just engage with this person as much as I want to, as much as I want to see them like this. They have their own limits. They have their own personhood that they wish to express, so we need to kind of cooperate with that, some way find the balance. So on the same day, we also have that Sun sextile Uranus, and I think that this is going to be really important for that new moon that we're going to have the following day. In this, I think we have to ask ourselves, who do we betray when others align with values that we don't support, right? We have to kind of be a little bit more involved with these shakeups, understanding them. As much as it can be good to go along with others, how have others written their own script that makes us respond and react according to our own authority and belief system? The Sun is in Pisces, connecting to the mutable waters, and Saturn's also there, almost like the Sun is responding to the difficulties in Taurus with Mars squaring Uranus, needing to see and acknowledge that interaction, but in a way that makes us maybe root for Mars, because Mars is also in the detriment of the Sun. The Sun gets it. The Sun relates to Mars and wishes to shake things up himself. The Sun may be corroborating and aiding Mars, but is also influenced by Saturn's conjunction. So there is this kind of limit of our own boundaries, our own reality that we have to acknowledge. Kind of how do we engage with our own belief system that can align us with the best action that is possible for us. Recognizing that, okay, all of these things are happening. They're coming to my sight. They're coming to my vision. Mars and Saturn, Mars and the Sun, they can't necessarily see each other right now. So there is this difficulty with those two needing to kind of help each other, maybe. But also the Sun is kind of responding to maybe things that he can't directly see. He can't really directly acknowledge maybe all of the things that Mars is doing, right? There's this somewhat difficulty to rectify that, to figure that out, to move forward and to deal with these things, to kind of say, okay, this is maybe the ways I wish to rewrite some of these things. Maybe I wish to take hold of that Promethean fire, engage with it, kind of express myself as well, and to not be so diligent about just going with the flow, just going with where other people want us to go. All right, so let's get into this new moon in Pisces on the 10th. We have this lunation taking place at 20 degrees of Pisces, sextiling Uranus. Another new moon that is aspecting Uranus. As well with this lunation, it is the Sun is separating from a conjunction with Saturn and applying to a conjunction with Neptune. Jupiter, who rules this lunation, is in Taurus at 12 degrees. With this lunation, I think we're kind of looking back, we're looking at the past, closing one chapter, starting a new one, and sometimes only time will tell what will become of our dreams, our fantasies that we may need to make real, that we wish to materialize. There's a sea, an ocean of possibilities, what will work best for us, and what we wish to experience. The lunation, this is the new moon, the last lunation, the last kind of clean lunation before we get into the eclipses. And so, we're asking what's going to happen. What are, can we get the things back that we wanted to get back when we maybe start new chapters, when we go forward? It's kind of letting one thing go, letting that cycle go and starting a new one. Sometimes, especially with that configuration with Saturn and Pisces, it may make us feel left lonely, forced to accept what is and set sail towards a new destination. Can we achieve what we wish to achieve? Can we get back that energy that we may have? Only time will tell. Are we set on our dreams and what it means to actually live them? What is the material cost to chase our dreams? And how can we align with them more authentically? How can we create a better structure for ourselves to engage with those dreamy desires, those dreamy fantasies, the things that we wish to elicit of our soul? So what is the baseline? What are we basing the value of our fantasies on to make things real? What is the material cost? Where are our foundations and how can we best align with that? And how can we align with reality while accepting what we wish to dream up? How can we remain a little bit engaged with the fantasies at the same time letting go the disillusionments that may come up? Sometimes, with expectations, with relationships, certain things that we're wanting to achieve in our lives, we need to kind of recognize, okay, this is the material cost of what we're getting into, and maybe how we kind of store those materials, especially because Pisces deals with a lot of treasures of the sea. A lot of the value that we place on things. And so it can be a little bit difficult to face the sensitive nature of ourselves juxtaposed with that Saturn placement and kind of allow reality to maybe tell us some things that we need to realize, tell us some things that we need to see a little bit more deeply, or at least reflect on a little bit more deeply. So with this lunation, I think there's some disillusionments that can come crashing down, fantasies succumbing to the material reality, facing the world head on with our sensitive nature. What do we want? We have to be strategic, especially with Saturn's placement in Pisces, which asks us to be objective about our goals, dreams, and spirituality. Plan properly, as Neptune may make us feel like things will go smooth, and from a distance we maybe are thinking that, but in reality when we kind of meet those kind of blurring of the lines, that kind of Neptunian waters, which can sometimes take us so deep into the fantasy that we may get sick a little bit. We need to plan properly. We can't just expect all things to go well, all things to go fortuitously. We need to distance ourselves from a reality we need and be more proactive towards the way we want to succeed, the way we want to get through. Yeah, in this lunation, the new moon in Pisces at 20 degrees, I think we're going to have to recognize, okay, this is something maybe I want to dream up. This is maybe some fantasy I have. This is some dream I have. We want to make that real. We're very sensitive to that. Our souls are very sensitive to those things that allow us to express ourselves in real life, to generate those possibilities. We have to be a little bit more diligent about how we engage with that. Sometimes it'll take a little bit of time for us to get where we want to go. We have to be willing, we have to hang on and be sensitive towards those dreams. We have to not give up. Things may come crashing down, different aspects that we kind of don't want to engage with, some things that may kind of take away from our own personal security or feeling comfortable, and just kind of acknowledging, our comfort is important, but sometimes we have to get out of our comfort zone to be able to experience a lot of those dreams and fantasies to become real. We have to kind of get out of this maybe wishy-washy nature of how things may not appear to be going swiftly. And we have to accept that if we really want to materialize a lot of these realities that we wish to dream up, we have to stay patient. We have to hold on to them. We have to be diligent about not giving up. not letting go and being there for the long haul. Alright, so the same day as that new moon in Pisces, we have a sextile from Mercury to Pluto. And this Mercury sextile to Pluto, Mercury is in Aries at the very beginning of Aries, and Pluto's at the very beginning of Aquarius. And with this, I think there's kind of like, I can't believe this. I can't believe what's going on. I can't believe all that's happening. Independence in relationships bears itself with revelations, changes, transportations, and evolution. That process of where are we really going with this direction that Pluto's taking us. Who we want to become takes direct support from this aspect as well, pushing us to confront difficult dynamics that may make us separate and draw some divisions between friends and allies. Sometimes, especially with that Mercury in Aries, spouting off and sending shots doesn't come with its own judgments, right? Sharing secrets may get us further away from others if it was influenced by gossip or revenge. Rivalries take our attention. How will we get revenge? Is it worth it? Getting over someone and enacting revenge to do that may not be worth it in the end. It may make us, in the end, it may make us be a little bit more petty and a little bit more separated from the possibilities that can actually happen through adventure and letting the information flow to us and allow us to change and direct ourselves with our own will. Using this energy to direct our own mind towards adventure and going places, doing things that we've never done. I think this is an aspect to definitely stay grounded with. Don't leave those who truly have your back because they don't respond how we want them to. Control issues with information and how others digest it needs to be left alone. How other people intake the information that we may present to them needs to not be so overly watched. It needs to not be overbearing. Let go and move on. Some shocking realizations of how others treat each other should direct us to invest more in ourselves and not so much outwardly. With Mercury in Aries sextiling Pluto in Aquarius, there's going to be some things where it's like, I can't believe you. I can't believe you've done this to me. It's there's a little bit of this kind of information that we're maybe pulling from, which can actually support us going towards the direction we want to, starting something new, going towards adventure, maybe leaving the gossip, the mishmash of what people say about us behind, and just trying to focus on us, focusing on adventure, going new places, doing new things. So, just acknowledge some control issues with information and how others digest the things that we present at their doorstep. Move on. Some shocking revelations about how others treat each other should direct us to invest more in ourselves, to kind of leave things alone where they are, to not try to mess with that information in a way that would make us feel like we're getting revenge or make us feel like, hey, I got it back. That momentary gain can sometimes leave us a little bit separated from allies and support that we want, especially with sharing information, secrets that can come out as a little bit untrustworthy on our part. So just be careful with this aspect. Don't try to engage with kind of the megaphone of Mercury sextile Pluto. Just kind of be careful with some information that's revealed to you. Let the story tell itself. Focus on yourself. I think sometimes with Mercury, there's kind of like this side to Mercury where we need to kind of recognize Mercury's a trickster. So when we want to sway the information in our favor and kind of control it, that can kind of bite us in the ass. It can kind of make us a little bit exposed to other people not trusting how we deal with that information. Maybe thinking we're overbearing with it. Maybe thinking that we're adding a little bit of glib lies or a little bit of fabrication to what we're saying. So just be careful with that. Don't be too don't see things too literally, especially because Aries is more of an optical sign. It's dealing with the fire that we see, the kind of the fire that comes from the heavens, and in a way that can really teach us a lot of good things, and we can kind of teach others really good things. We just have to be careful about trying to spoon feed people information in the way that we want them to digest it, to kind of leave things where they are, to let people make their own decisions, to let people come to their own realizations. All right, so let's get into Venus's ingress into Pisces on March 11th. So this is a really important aspect. I think this is a really important ingress because we'll have this Venus in Pisces only really during the eclipse that takes place in Libra on the 25th. So Venus will also rule that eclipse. And so I think this Venus ingress is pretty important to highlight. And of course, something else to highlight about this ingress is that this is Venus's home. It's Venus's home of exaltation here, right? Venus is exalted here. So with an exaltation, the planet is raised up, in some way pinched, to achieve results in a better way than it normally would. Venus in Pisces enters this sign with Saturn, Neptune, and the Sun being there. And she's blasting that shit. She been kicked when I was down, but that shit doesn't matter now. Being receptive to the culture and atmosphere we wish to grow in ourselves takes precedent. We are being pinched to let go, especially with Venus and Pisces. Venus is kind of forced to let go of kind of the rhythm of how relationships take place and not try to fix them to one exact moment or one exact feeling, but is instead allowing that to kind of take us in new directions, to kind of let rise the waves of Pisces and kind of see where things will actually go in the end, to enjoy the journey as well. Being introspective to ourselves and our experiences helps us to be knowledgeable about our own wishes and the love we wish to experience. Being sympathetic also to the cycle of life helps us to see the treasures of the deep, to see the deep treasures we want to cultivate for ourselves. Being healthy and fulfilled helps us to appreciate the love around us and bask in the ocean of possibilities of Pisces. Ability to enjoy life regardless of circumstances. You know, that's Venus in Pisces for you. Venus in Pisces will find the way to enjoy life no matter what, to see kind of the gifts that are being given through the difficulties, to surmount those, to be able to rise above that. I think this aspect, Venus in Pisces is definitely concerned with society and relationships, bringing a softer side to Saturn in Pisces and cooling things down a little bit, or at least tempering them in Saturn's case, because Saturn's pretty cool as well. Saturn's kind of the dry and cold planet, so there's a little bit of charming Saturn up. Mercury in Aries kind of also highlights instability with relationships. Not everyone may laugh at your own jokes, may see your own authenticity for what it is. There may be this kind of clash of, just trying to cultivate your own atmosphere, and at the same time, people are maybe being a little bit too direct, being a little bit too dry about things in that case with Mercury in Aries. So don't throw in the towel because others can't see where your beauty and love comes from. Set the tone for how you wish to vibe and enjoy life with love and pleasure. Be studious and explore yourself with passion and love. Venus is very capable in the sign of Pisces. Venus is very smart, very receptive to different understandings of the world. Kind of like the deeper we go, the more we have yet to learn. The deeper we get to like the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the more we realize there's a lot more that we didn't know was there. So Venus is able to receive that wisdom, ingest it, to understand it, to bask in that, and to be learned from those experiences. I think Venus in Pisces is very wise, very understanding, very empathetic. That's something that I think we need right now. We always need that. We always need that. That's why I make talismans. So yeah, be studious, explore yourself with passion and love. Venus rules Libra and the South Node, so this will be really important for that South Node eclipse. And it's here to remind us to let go of the expectations we have. As much as we want to fulfill ourselves and enjoy relationships, less pressure and whittling down the expectations to be detached from others, but present in our own place. So I think this is kind of also raising that up to kind of acknowledge, these eclipses, and kind of also in turn the sign of Taurus, which is where Jupiter is right now, as well as the other sign that Venus rules, Libra. So just kind of acknowledging those fruits, those blossomings that those two signs are going to experience. And I think with the South Node in Libra, there's a little bit of expectations from relationships that we need to acknowledge, that we need to kind of recognize that maybe the North Node in Aries is trying to get us to take on the mantle of raising our own expressions, our own desires up, to take those on ourselves, to take on the responsibility of doing that ourselves. Yeah, I love Venus and Pisces. Honestly, there's a lot of skull and crossbones imagery that I get omen watching when I've done Venus and Pisces work. And I really think that that's because, X marks the spot, and sometimes the death of our experiences, the death of like what we wish to love and enjoy, can sometimes actually bring a lot of fruit to us. It's kind of like the cycle continues, and through kind of the disintegration, the breaking down of those experiences or even those expectations, that we can kind of arise to have a new blossom grow, to have a new flower grow from that. With the skull and crossbones, I really think that Venus is more willing to kind of let things end in Pisces than really start new things. She's in the immutable waters of Pisces, her exaltation. So she's acknowledging, okay, this possibility may end for me, but then there's going to be a new one. Life is evergreen. Hope is evergreen. We can always find something to grow. And I think that's what gives Venus the pinch in Pisces, to kind of recognize the death sometimes of life, and how that also gives us rebirth, to kind of breathe a little bit of light into our own life, to breathe a little bit of good energy into our own cultivation, our own, the atmosphere, the culture we're trying to internally grow. So yeah, it's like sometimes people won't be able to take our jokes, won't be able to take our laughter, our love, our pleasures, and that's okay. There's no expectations for other people doing that. Sometimes it's about reaching inside of ourselves and enjoying that ourselves, not expecting other people to enjoy that for us, but kind of acknowledging life is sometimes a little bit of a journey that we have to cross the waters on. Sometimes we're going to be alone, sometimes we're going to be with people, but we can't always expect there to be someone that will saddle up and ride with us on those journeys. We have to kind of take things one day at a time, allow the journey to be enjoyed, not be too integrated in one outcome or the other, but just kind of acknowledge that life is precious. Life is very delicate. And the deaths that we may experience with certain expectations, metaphorically, obviously, but maybe literally. Maybe sometimes realizing one thing has to die so that another thing can grow. That can be a little bit difficult. Venus can kind of be pinched as well, to kind of accept the sadness sometimes of Pisces, a little bit of the sadness that we may feel in our hearts when we yearn for those experiences, when we yearn to feel loved, to be accepted by others, and kind of wanting us to go towards other waters which would help us have those experiences, which would be more receptive to those sensualities, the sensuous love that we wish to experience. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about this Sun conjunction with Neptune on March 17th. This is a pretty interesting conjunction, I think. We got the Moon in Cancer during this time, as well as Venus in Pisces. So this is a little bit of a soft and free aspect, kind of departing from that Saturn in Pisces conjunction that we had earlier, back at the end of February, and kind of getting into the Neptunian vibes. And I think that as Saturn and Neptune do get closer, there is going to be a little bit more of that crunch, a little bit more of that compression towards the dreams and the realities which we wish to make real, how we're doing that, sometimes disillusionment. But here we have a little bit deeper integration with the Neptune. Yeah, this is a really nice aspect, letting go of substances. I don't know, I think that the Neptune conjunction, I think that sometimes, Neptune can promote our use of substances and our use of illusions to kind of get to where we want to go. Sometimes I kind of talk about this, but there's a little bit of a pedestal aspect with Neptune, where we're kind of so far in a fantasy that we're kind of treating something like it's on a pedestal, like we're kind of getting near it, but we can't really get too near it because it's just so high in our minds. And I think that in and of itself, the sun can kind of see through a little bit of that, can kind of look through that, can kind of flesh out, okay, it can kind of almost have like a, it's like cutting a knife in the cloud, in the fog, and kind of peering through a window in that. So with that, I think that it'll be good to kind of embrace practical reality, to kind of use that Saturnian influence to maybe let go of substances and illusions. Pick up the phone, let's go out, let's have fun, let's go and be free. Very carefree aspect to this, a very carefree configuration we got going on with that Neptune conjunct the sun. Sun likes to enjoy things, likes to express himself, likes to generate possibilities, likes to watch things grow, illuminate things, put that light on things. So with this, I think there is this kind of bigger love that we're maybe getting to, this bigger kind of grander idea of what that can mean to us, almost like the pure expression of divine love in a lot of ways. So good for advertisements, good for release and commitment to fun. Something is missing though, I think, with this aspect. And what I mean by missing is I think that there's a little bit too much, I wouldn't say softness, but I definitely think that there's kind of a missing ingredient. And maybe that's somewhat of the reality that can we need to kind of base some of these expectations on, maybe some of these fantasies, these illusions on. But regardless, sometimes like we're engaged, we got on a fun night in town, we kind of have this really big expectation for what's supposed to happen. I mean, I remember when I was younger, I would go out to a bar and I kind of have this really big expectation of like, and this is the night everything's going to come true. And that kind of seems to be what this aspect is kind of entailing. But then with that Saturn conjunction in Pisces, that Saturn co-presence, there's a little bit of something missing with that. There's a little bit more of almost like, walking on a tightrope and kind of in a dream, you're like walking on a tightrope and then all of a sudden you look around and you realize the tightrope's floating in midair. So yeah, with that, we see and experience the joy anyway. We kind of notice it. It's kind of brought to our attention. Yeah, things falling into place, but if we are too connected to fantasy and expectations, it can ruin the fun of now, of the present, of being integrated into right now and what we can enjoy right now. Not being too in the future with these expectations, not being too expectant on what we want to have happen, the outcome. But, especially with Saturn there, I think that this can kind of maybe want us to guarantee some of those things, maybe wanting to have a little bit more firmness with this. But not everything will meet expectations. Feeling isn't always believing. Watery depths that can make us feel exposed and vulnerable to how others treat us. This is an aspect where I think it's important to open your heart up and let the light in, but don't stay attached or get hung up on others meeting our needs. Let people be people, let things rise and fall, see the bigger picture. It's kind of like a holy Pope affirmation with sex and love. Everyone wanting to be a star, let them have their own Holy Communion, reset our fantasies and what we wish to sow the seeds of our fantasies through. Lots of stimulation here. I think that's another aspect of Neptune, kind of like this inundation with stimulation. Just kind of like, oh, there's this possibility, but with that, we can kind of set our fantasies a little bit too high a little bit too high in the sky. And so that lots of stimulation that can have us feeling fried, like we're losing a little bit of energy through the mental kind of gymnastics that we may try to put things on. Like we meet someone new and then, we hear like a red flag and then we're like, we don't hear that or something, or, we're talking to someone and we're wanting to like work with them and we're only hearing what we like. We're not really hearing the things that we need to hear, kind of a thing. Um, yeah, as Mercury conjoins Rahu also, because we got Mercury getting ready to conjoin Rahu pretty soon with this aspect, we may also really be independent and self-focused in our interactions, so that can kind of highlight a little bit of this edge to things, this edge to kind of meeting our own personal needs of connection, not seeing what we need to clearly and just forcing illusions to the surface which are not corroborated by reality. Yeah, so I think that it's kind of like with that Saturn-Sun conjunction that we're having, the Saturn conjunction that we had, and then now we're having the Neptune one. It's kind of like the Sun and Saturn, learning the lessons, and then when it comes to kind of interacting with them to kind of make them real, it's kind of like we're not. There can be this idea that we're not like really. It's this like moment of kind of realizing, oh, that's what I'm doing. It's kind of like we're so stuck in the fantasy, especially like that Saturn Neptune configuration we got in Pisces right now. As they get closer, this can kind of open our awareness to kind of see, oh, this is where I'm missing the story. Oh, this is where I'm filling the blank, where I kind of should not do that, where I should kind of just be a little bit more careful about creating that reality, that fantasy into reality. So yeah, I think that this is going to be important to kind of keep our minds open, to keep ourselves sober-minded with this aspect, to not be too integrated into escapism or any means like that, but to kind of just be a little bit more plain with it. And it can be a lot of fun. I think this Sun Cazimi with Neptune is really interesting, especially with Venus in Pisces, as well as Jupiter in Taurus. But regardless, I still think that we need to be a little bit more careful about our own sensitivity. The moon in Cancer can sometimes expose that. So, yeah, sometimes it can feel like we're kind of just letting all of ourselves fall out, and in reality, we should have a little bit more careful boundaries with that. We should have a little bit more carefulness to integrate others maybe into our own reality, and not be so keen on just setting those expectations and expecting people to manage them, but to be honest with ourselves about maybe what's our duty, maybe what's our expectations, and how we can fill that in ourselves and by our own means. All right, so let's talk about Mercury conjoining the North Node in Aries. This is on March 18th. This is also the beginning of Mercury's retrograde shadow. Mercury will come back to this moment, so it's important to kind of remember all the things that are going on, maybe some challenges that were being presented that will take a little bit more time to deal with, some projects that we're managing, some things that we're trying to make real, some contracts that we're maybe signing, just being aware of all these things. Mercury retrogrades can be a time where we revisit these things. We revisit maybe how we were handling ourselves interpersonally, handling contracts with other people, handling rules of engagement with other people, as well as maybe communications, technology, and other things like that, which can be important because as Mercury retrogrades, we're going to revisit those topics that Mercury was signaling the sky that we would be dealing with. So with Mercury conjoined to the North Node, now again, the North Node kind of represents a little bit of smoke and mirrors. It's the head of the dragon, and in a lot of ways it can kind of represent the height of our personal expectations, the ceiling of maybe what we're capable of, maybe feeling like this is how high I can climb. But in reality, like I said, Rahu is a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's not an actual planet or anything like that. It's a point in the sky signaling where the eclipses will take place. Beginnings and endings happen. And with the North Node, it's kind of, appearing out of nowhere. Rahu's kind of initiating a start to something, kind of making something real, kind of raising the land up from the earth in a lot of ways. So adventure, high expectations for personal achievement, and fiery expressions of ideas and communication are going to be circling around, going to be buzzing about as Mercury is kind of turned up the volume with Rahu. And this is a pretty gritty Mercury, especially with Mercury being in Aries nonetheless. Chomping things down ferociously with the North Node. Mercury and Rahu get along pretty well and instructs us about the rules of the shadows and foretells about the eclipse. So, big volume, optics, and showmanship here, especially with Rahu and Ketu, the North Node and the South Node. They kind of don't really respect optics. They kind of play with that. They kind of play, they're a little bit heretical to the light, right? So they like to kind of say no to it. They kind of disagree with that. They kind of second guess that. They're a little bit more like, well, this is the height, and then kind of removing that carpet up from underneath you. Or maybe even removing the ceiling from over above you and allowing you to ascend further, right? So this shadow period begins and our attention to detail somewhat diminishes, I think, especially with this Rahu aspect. Rahu's kind of turning up the volume, and Mercury's kind of dealing with that, and it's kind of big and kind of expansive things that Mercury's going to be engaging with. I mean, there's a little bit of Rahu and Mercury that are kind of looking towards things, maybe peering through the smoke and mirrors, wanting to figure that out. Mercury is actually one of the planets that's best adept with the nodes, dealing with them. However, even though Mercury deals with the details, the little things, and connects them one to one, that smoke and mirrors kind of clouds the vision to be able to really see what we're connecting in some way. The loud phone makes us appear out of nowhere to deliver information, not having any care about what people think and expressing ourselves outside the normal limits. Mercury kind of not wanting to play by the rules here, being heretical to the point of division, intelligence oriented to the battlefield and weaponry of the dragon's venom, taking extreme conflicts perhaps in relationships, taking things too seriously to express boundaries in personal space, the smoke and mirrors clouding our interpretation of details, which could escalate things in a way that we don't want to go. So it's kind of like with some things that come to our doorstep, different relationship dynamics, because Mercury is one of the relationship planets, dealing with kind of connecting people together, sharing ideas, having people cooperate on projects and stuff. Be careful of reading too deep into conflicts and responding through overbearing and overpowering ways. Mercury will return to this point. Things will get resolved. Open yourself to the possibility that the first reaction may not actually fit the circumstance. Maybe your reaction is, maybe we may not see the whole picture, and how we react can really shape this retrograde phase, right? So, showing others we mean business may leave us uncooperative with the reality we want to create as well. Appearing in others' business maligns our own good thoughts, ideas, and associations we want to create. So yeah, this is a little bit of a difficult aspect for Mercury. Mercury is kind of not really sure how to deal with this volume of energy, and in some way it can kind of eat at us to maybe burn some bridges or think larger than life about some things. And Mercury is not wanting to play by the rules either. Mercury is a little bit heretical to the rules at this point, kind of almost fully being consumed by that Rahu, that shadow point of the nodes. All right, so let's get into the Sun in Aries on March 19th, the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere, and the autumnal equinox in the southern hemisphere. So with the Sun in Aries, what does the Sun represent? Well, when you look at the horizon when the Sun rises, it's kind of representing that ever-flowing youth that we can have, that ever-flowing youth that will always be there. It kind of, so to speak, always maybe in our lifetimes, not trying to speak for the, forever in history, but that idea of the Sun represents something that has helped generations past, that has been there. It represents health. In a lot of ways, this represents the kind of light of our life, how we express ourselves, the joy that we create. So yeah, the sun in Aries is pretty strong. That's where the sun has his exaltation. One of my favorite lines from the Orphic hymns talks about, with various founding golden lyre, 'tis mine to fill the world with harmony divine. The sun likes to have fun. The sun likes to represent ourselves, likes to represent the light that we share, the light that is very precious from what we seep out into the world, how we engage with the world, right? Especially when we're wanting to be seen. So the sun also represents strength, bravery, independence, inceptivity, autonomy, brightness, and heat between how we wish to be seen publicly, and visibility is what we wish for, especially with the sun. And the sun and Aries go pretty well. The North Node, however, here obscures the optics and makes things somewhat disharmonious for the sun. It's a little bit difficult for the sun because the sun was just dealing with Saturn and Pisces, and now the sun's got to go through the eclipses in Aries, his home, his exaltation home, right? And like I've said with the exaltations, they markate the point in which the sun is able to rise above his station in life. It kind of markates this position that the sun is able to get to through being pinched. Demarcates the point at which the sun is able to rise above some of his challenges, maybe some of his weaknesses, and get to a point where he's a lot more strong, right? So with that, what is that? What's that kind of pinch? Well, Aries is really about initiatory actions. It's a cardinal sign. And Leo, his home, his domicile, is a fixed sign. So in Leo, in kind of the lion's den, the snake pit, so to speak, the sun, the snake pit. It's actually pretty good with the sun in Aries. But regardless, so the sun in Leo is a little bit more rigid, a little bit more doing what he wants to, not changing positions, being there regardless. That's really good for the sun, right? That's really good for youth. That's really good for strength, bravery, independence, autonomy. However, the challenge in Aries is that it's kind of like I've said about Aries being kind of like a phoenix that rises from the ashes. The sun gets to start anew, gets to kind of initiate something new, gets to create something new, go towards something new that challenges him in a way that gets him out of his comfort zone. That kind of reestablishes a little bit more of, hey, this is what I can do. Kind of like a gladiator being going into a battle. That kind of feeling of, I'm a little bit scared. This is kind of, I'm a little bit timid. I don't really, I'm usually in the royalty chamber, kind of lording over people. But here I'm kind of battling. So there's a little bit more of like the sun integrating himself into his kingdom by fighting for what he wants, fighting for his independence. Yeah, so attempting to start and get things done can mislead others of our own personal choices and in reality. Strong self-concept is what the sun in Aries really helps to do. Healthy ego, cardinality, and being fixed drives us to start new endeavors. It's kind of like, well, I want to get to a point where I am more where I am kind of at a better state in this. The sun wants to be fixed. He wants to kind of be doing the same thing consistently. So when he starts something new, he wants to finish that and make that last, right? Starting new endeavors, beginnings, and not letting ourselves stay in any one certain paradigm that would cause us to be rigid about our identity. To be pushed to change and growing with confidence through that. Gotta use time well. We gotta get shit done and reign our kingdom. We gotta have, we have to kind of rule our kingdom. And so the important thing is shutting down the naysayers by doing it different and not staying in the expectations of others, but kind of saying, no, I can challenge that. The eclipses are near and call us to reimagine relationships and start new beginnings, right? That will help us to flesh our lives out. Issues creating big changes and shakeups to our identity as well, especially with that North Node there. We're getting into eclipse season here. In about 6 days will be the Sun in Aries, Moon in Libra, lunar eclipse, the South Node eclipse, highlighting more of the South Node here. What this calls for is to appear, be present, don't run the mouth, show others who we are by being decisive with our actions. It's kind of like we were born for this energy. We were born for this shit, and not pretending to live in the smoke and mirrors, the intimidation of how we can get our way, especially with Rahu. Yeah, like the sun in Aries, kind of not wanting to talk big talk, but that North Node in Aries, especially with Mercury there, kind of having to deal with that. Maybe we said something that we were going to do, and we're having to really own up to it and show people what we are capable of, right? So appear, be present, don't run the mouth. We're born for this shit, and not pretending to live in the smoke and mirrors, but being ourselves and the dispensers of joy. It takes hard work to rule our kingdom. Yeah, and we're turning up the notch here, especially with that North Node as well. So it doesn't mean to be louder, but to live our lives boldly. We create the spark not through expectations of greatness, but by doing the damn thing. Joy and celebration isn't just to show off, but for us to be present as well. Kind of acknowledge, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm at. It's a good thing to be alive. That joy and celebration that we need to enact in our lives to appreciate ourselves. Not by overly, not by just overly celebrating things, but by recognizing our achievements and saying, no, I did that, and I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to keep doing it, but I'm going to enjoy myself on the way. Don't be looking at anyone else. Be present with your own joy and where it takes you. Don't compare. Be yourself. Don't think about how you look. People will use that against you, especially with Rahu there, the smoke and mirrors. So it's important to not be too integrated in how other people see us, but be very integrated into our own image, what makes us us. And even with this North Node, I think we may even see a rebirth of our own self-image, maybe a burgeoning new self-image that wishes to express itself, right? We want to be there. We want to be present with our lives. We want to live our lives with the choices and the autonomy that we have been given. And the sun in Aries can be a good time for that. However, the eclipses are near, so there is going to be big beginnings, big endings. So look out for that. Don't get too lost in the optics. Don't get too lost in how people view you, how people see you. Be integrated with starting things new and setting yourself up for the task. Giving yourself that challenge. Saying, no, I can do this. This may be something new, but I'm going to find a way to be good at it. I'm going to find a way to make it work, right? All right, so now let's get into March 21st, the sun in Aries sextiling Pluto in Aquarius. So this isn't the first time that we've got the sun in Aries with that Pluto in Aquarius. Last year we had the same thing, but this time we're kind of getting used to that Pluto stepping off the neck of everything in Aries, right? That Pluto in Cap that was really pushing the Aries agenda, so to speak, right? And this aspect is kind of like a ritual, revealing and exposing the underbelly of our leadership to be more real and present. Pluto helps the sun transform in a different way than being in Capricorn. It's a ritual to transform ourselves. It's a ritual to see beyond ourselves, to integrate with the larger picture at hand. We got to hold our heads up high and breathe in the ethereal smoke, especially from Rahu, right? Letting our hearts transform. The sins plague the air, but letting go and giving in to our own joy and expression helps us feel alive. 4 days until the eclipse, the smoke descends and draws our attention inward, darkness on the bright and fiery sun, as we accept the only way to change is internally changing, transforming our expression and how we want to use the tools of the underworld to our advantage. This configuration provides the sun gleaning into health, expression, generation of life, how we sustain ourselves, our visibility, individuality, paternal figures, authority, and how we align with that, with crises, endings, and beginnings, power and control, as well as transformations and regeneration. Right now, we're checking in on Pluto and Aquarius and how that's going, and bringing some light to the tools of the underworld and the new technologies that we can use from it. Pluto will soon station retrograde. Pluto usually stations retrograde when it gets about a square aspect from the sun. So there are some limits to this new power we experience. But I think this is kind of an interesting aspect. I don't think that's necessarily good or bad for the sun. I actually think that it can be a little bit more reaching into the underbelly of how we lead the kingdom. And that can actually help us in a lot of ways to kind of recognize, okay, maybe this is something that I can work with. Maybe this is something I can deal with to change, to kind of integrate my own personal values, to kind of really check in on how my light is hitting others, and to acknowledge maybe some of the ways that I'm changing, some of the ways that I'm transforming, and how that can be really good. How that can be really good for me, how that can be really good for us at large. Not being too watchful of ourselves in a way that would paint us in a bad light, that would make us fear how we connect with others, but kind of acknowledge, hey, this is life. Other people may not see us how we want. That's okay. Maybe this is information that can help us transform and be a little bit more internally integrated into how we wish to be perceived. But at the same time, we have to recognize that seeing isn't always believing, and we can't let other people confuse our own personal story with the mistakes that we make when we're ruling our kingdom. We can't portray ourselves sometimes in those frames of reference. It kind of dims our own light, and it can kind of create a little bit of an expectation to overperform in a way that we're just not capable of. So just kind of recognizing, okay, how can I carry myself with light that helps me to remain consistent in where I want to go? There's some things that we may have to acknowledge, perhaps even revealing some information, some revelations that can help us to initiate those changes. This is gearing up towards the eclipse in Libra, the South Node lunar eclipse. So just be aware of that. Some of these new revelations will kind of spark a little bit more curiosity, a little bit more integration in how we want to be seen, and also recognize at the same time that as much as we want to lead our lives, there's always going to be a little bit of a difficulty enacting that. We're humans, we're fallible. Evolution changes us, directs us to different endeavors. But it is the joy and pleasure that can help us sustain that can help sustain our growth, that can help sustain our lives. Yeah. All right, so on the same day of March 21st, Venus conjoins Saturn. This aspect, ugly as a lullaby, pretty like a car crash. Experiment on me. The Halsey song. Anyways, so this is an interesting aspect. Somewhat auspicious for Saturn, not so much for Venus, though. We'll get into why. This aspect is really helpful towards constructing better boundaries and limitations in relationships, helping to see the terms of agreement with those we engage with, those we do business with, potentially, and align us with loved ones in a more prosperous way that acknowledges, hey, this is what we wish to grow, this is what we wish to establish through this connection that we are making, this connection with relationships, right? Venus is the other planet that deals with relationships, and more intrinsically the one that deals with those connections that we wish to create. Mercury, in a way, is more so dealing with people that we connect to, but Venus is more so engaged with the long-term relationships that we have, sustaining those. And with Saturn here, difficulty that Venus experiences with aspects to Saturn is somewhat tempered. Venus aligns with Saturn and helps him be in a good mood, in a better mood at least, helps to be receptive to the longevity of how we wish to make things happen. Whereas the decrease, negativity, restriction, scarcity, pessimism that can corrupt the even keel attitude of Venus in Pisces, forcing us to be more realistic. How can we be flexible with our end goals? How can we see things more authentically that can align us with the work, love, and atmosphere we wish to cultivate? This aspect somewhat weakens Venus, but helps to bring a reset to relationships, air out our grievances, and get on the same page with the things we need to rectify, or help to end things we need to let go of. Venus is also getting ready to sextile Jupiter here as well, which makes this a little bit easier for Venus. This helps to bring balance and explore more possibilities for sustained connections that can last. potentially reflecting on the past and rising up out of difficult relationships or community, to be on our own page, to be on the page we wish to establish with other people. Taking things into Venus's hands and telling people to fuck off, maybe. Venus is kind of telling Saturn, hey, you really want to see what I can do. You know, this is more on auspicious Saturn alignment. So, especially for Venus, she's kind of portraying to Saturn, hey, this is what I'm capable of. Hey, you're in my home. You're in my home of exaltation. Let's do things how I want to do them, right? Heavy metal Venus in Pisces, seen and not heard. Romance getting the last punch. Don't burn the witches, they will get their last laugh. So here I think it's interesting with this aspect is that Venus is raised up. She's able to surmount the difficulties maybe that Saturn is placing before her. Kind of still believing in romance, still believing in the good ways that we can live our lives, and wanting to establish a better support system for ourselves to do that. Wanting to enact a little bit better of an opportunity for us to get ahead and establish that. And sometimes, you know, with Saturn, there can be a certain kind of scarcity. And with Venus here, she's kind of acknowledging, okay, there is some scarcity here. Maybe there's some things, there's some limits to what I can actually create here. But at the same time, I'm willing to rise with those challenges. I'm willing to ride the waves out. And Venus does get the last laugh. She's exalted here. She's a little bit more strong than Saturn is. But at the same time, you know, Venus is kind of acknowledging and confronting the reality that she's placed in and not trying to hide from it, but trying to use it toward her advantage. All right, let's keep going. Let's talk about Mars's ingress into Pisces on March 22nd. And there is Saturn here as well, so we have to acknowledge that. And Mars and Saturn alignments, they're pretty difficult. We have to kind of acknowledge that, deal with it. Somewhat of an impeded action from Mars's side. And especially with how Mars gels in the sign of Pisces, it can be a little bit difficult for him to really establish his own discipline here, to really get things going. And with that, Saturn's kind of presenting some limitations to him to kind of acknowledge, hey, like this is maybe as far as your energy is going. You can't always burn the midnight oil. Mars struggles with the indecisiveness of Pisces, sometimes rushing things that need more carefulness, and a sort of rashness there also. Lenient and somewhat undisciplined in areas we need to be more rigid, and rigid where we need to be a little bit more lenient. With Pisces, there's a lot of deep values here, a lot of deeper values that Mars connects to, that kind of speaks to Mars. So there's a little bit more of an emotional side that gets Mars going. Sturdy morals that Mars is wanting to portray. It's kind of like that zeal and disgust that sometimes Mars can have towards certain things that are not of his liking, you know, to be against them. They're maybe more oriented in the emotions, or especially the morals, because Pisces is a very moral sign ruled by Jupiter, right? Sometimes having some clear and direct opinions about large topics, being a little bit more versed in things that you may not expect Mars to be well versed in, being a little bit more aware of larger issues that Mars wants to deal with and tackle. But at the same time, there kind of comes with this, maybe sometimes, you know, he's kind of invested in these waters and not invested in those waters, so he's a little bit more curious, a little bit more cautious, and sometimes that can be a little bit difficult for Mars because he would want to maybe express that rigidity, that discipline towards what he doesn't like, instead of not knowing about it, being a little bit more curious, being a little bit more, I need to explore this a little bit more, and then I'll be able to decide. So with that, though, Mars is not too timid to speak on what he feels here. Some emotional bias to thinking as well, somewhat difficult time being extroverted and struggling to being in front of others, difficulty speaking, risky behavior. Being risky can be pretty hot, though. You know, Mars can be pretty enticing here. Kind of that risky behavior that Mars gets into in Pisces, because Pisces is very moral. And sometimes what Mars struggles to do in the signs of Jupiter is especially the water sign, I think. And what that risky behavior comes from is Pisces wanting to blend in the soup, maybe wanting to see the kind of the dreaminess, maybe acknowledging Mars kind of, well, this rule doesn't apply to me. This world doesn't apply to me. I don't really understand why people kind of say that this is bad. I don't deal with that. That's not something I deal with, so I don't have to worry about that. And sometimes leading to that risky behavior, wanting to kind of engage with that fantasy a little bit more. And so yeah, with this aspect, it's kind of like Mars is in some way letting the sun go down before letting people know how he really feels. And that indecisiveness kind of churns it. It kind of makes him a little bit more reactive. Like, you know what? No, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to really portray this. I'm going to really explain this. I'm really going to dive deep into, hey, I don't like that. Because last time I wasn't ready and I kind of let people get away from me without really acknowledging, hey, you can't press my limits like that. And so with that, Mars is kind of maybe focusing on where he's going, maybe the endings of things, especially with Saturn there. Who to put in his will, who to not put in his will. Talking about, don't make my death about my death, make it about my life. Don't look down, don't look up. Don't look down. It's kind of like don't look down. Don't look too deep into those waters. Don't look so far down that you're kind of not able to see where you can go, or at least kind of acknowledging, oh, I got to keep going, but I can't really go down. I can't really look down in a way that will make me be reactive towards these deeper things that maybe I'm not seeing. Because Mars needs to kind of acknowledge what's right in front of his face and deal with it, rather than kind of being caught here, being caught there, looking too much into this, maybe looking too much into how he's being portrayed in a light that he's not actually connected to that. So he kind of struggles to translate, okay, what does this mean for me? And sometimes it's kind of like the reactions that he may get from people through engaging in them in his own morals, how he sees fit, can leave people wondering, where are your actual morals? The comments from other people, the chatter from other people kind of telling him, well, what are you doing here, Mars? And Mars kind of being like, you know what? You're not going to see the deepness of the waters in which I flow through. So I can't really explain that to you all the time. I can't really give you the insight because a lot of this is more felt and sometimes it's not as well seen, right? And Mars does struggle with that. Mars likes the light. In Scorpio, there's a different case for that, but I think Mars does a little bit better with that light to be able to see exactly what he's doing. There may be a difficulty integrating ourselves amongst others, but we need to focus on our own perspective, values, and judgments, not be too integrated in how other people see us. Nobody can see the depths that we live in. They may only want to internalize this Mars aspect. I think it's difficult for Mars because other people, the onlookers, may want to internalize and bring up actions and optics of how we do what we do, who we are, and how that may not align with our actions, right? We are who we are, and we feel deeply. Mars is the rebel. He's a provocateur. He disturbs the peace that meets discord and difficulties expressing the heretical ideas he wants to pursue. Mars is a little bit anarchy in a way that he wants to discipline things, but there's some things that he's like, this rule doesn't apply to me. I don't really believe in this, especially in the sign of Pisces, kind of acknowledging, okay, maybe this is how people think that they need to live their lives. This is the common way to act. This is what the laws are telling me to do, but I don't really want to do that. Kind of matching erotic horniness with religious thinking, with spirituality in a way. Right? We love that. We may not be able to use our magic wand to create, but instead have it be directed towards managing ourselves, equal moderation of seriousness, and moderating our passions with compromises. There's somewhat impeded actions, especially because this is a sign in which Mars and Saturn will conjoin. It's interesting because during the first eclipse, Mars is a little bit earlier in the sign, so there may be some confusion in how Mars is trying to express that trying to grab that wand to choose and to make decisions, to control our fate, to work with our will, right? To write ourselves the story and to create that. But here, with Saturn being there, we have to kind of moderate our passions, have a little bit of seriousness with what we're doing, and compromise, which can lead to impeded actions. How do we ground our expressions to better stand on a firm foundation? We need to kind of use our own moral authority to our best pursuits for our will. All right, so the next aspect is on March 24th, sextile from Venus and Jupiter. And I honestly, this is an interesting one because this sextile will still be in play during the eclipse, during the lunar eclipse in the sign of Libra on the south node. And in this case, I think Venus is a little bit strung out from dealing with Saturn, and now Mars is there. So there's some things that she's kind of like, my hands are tied. I can't really do anything about this. As much as I want to create, as much as I want to be raised up with my kingdom, I have to kind of acknowledge where that kingdom is taking me, where things are going. And there is a little bit of a sluggish nature to sextiles. Taurus, Venus's sign, is intervening in a somewhat difficult way, only mitigating that Venus and Saturn conjunction. This is an aspect that can kind of introduce help and support from friends. The support is trying to get there, but at the same time, we're kind of dealing with a little bit of difficulty with that support being able to arrive on time. Help from friends being a little bit slow, being a little bit sluggish, really having to make things happen in some way, accepting, okay, my hands are tied here. There's only so much I can do. There's only so much support I can get. Figuring out how we can trust and have intimacy in relationships. That's something that that's something that Venus and Jupiter deal with. What does it mean for us to be snobby and having wisdom oriented towards finer comforts while we struggle to deal with remnants of difficult relationships? Sometimes we can be very, hey, I don't appreciate this. I don't like this. And I don't want to say snobby in a bad way, but that's just kind of a little bit of Taurus's taste. Taurus is very refined in the arts, very refined in taste. And Venus is kind of the taste maker, kind of understanding this is how this tastes, and this is how we kind of gather what we want to have more of that taste, how to cultivate that taste, how to elevate that taste. The mirror that Venus kind of has, kind of say, I don't really like how this looks. I need to do something about it. I need to change this. This is looking so that it looks better to my satisfaction. So yeah, this is especially kind of one of those aspects, especially before the eclipse, that we're kind of recognizing, okay, this is maybe where things have fallen apart, especially in the cultures, having a more cultural focus on where things are going. When everyone is more focused on the surface of the culture, what happens when we dive deeper into our desires and let go of everything needing to be perfect? Venus is kind of, what? There's some things that are just the way they are. I like this, I don't like this, and I gotta kind of recognize that in order to move forward, I need to let go of maybe trying to cultivate all of this right now. I need to have a little bit more of a longer haul with this, especially with Saturn being there in Pisces, kind of recognizing our limitations and kind of going back on that Venus conjunction with Saturn and kind of recognizing, okay, well, maybe that was good. Maybe that was kind of helpful to recognize that. Maybe there are some limits that I need to recognize, especially because Jupiter rules Pisces and Venus is able to talk to the ruler of Pisces, Jupiter, and is able to kind of flesh things out and say, okay, well, they said this. Is that actually, what's going on with that? And Jupiter's like, yeah, no, shit's difficult. You know what I mean? It's going to take a little bit longer than we thought. But we still need to do the work. We still have to get some help. We still have to use our resources in a practical way. But there's some things that we can hope for. There's some things that we can escape towards. And so with this, we have the eclipse coming on the next day. All right, so let's talk about the lunar eclipse in Libra. Libra, dude. This is going to happen on the end of March 24th / the beginning of March 25th, wherever your time zone is. And this is the first of 2 eclipses. So this is kind of opening the portal of those eclipses, kind of opening the portal of those big beginnings, those big changes that we're going to be shaken up into. So this eclipse is ruled by Venus in Pisces, co-present Mars and Saturn. It's kind of representing a period of reckoning and release, especially in relationships, requiring balance and harmony through big beginnings and endings. This brings tensions between individual desires, expressions, and self-boundaries to compromise and to cooperate with others. Venus rules this eclipse in Pisces conjunct Mars and Saturn, restraint and impeding actions and requiring discipline with our own emotional and relational dynamics, confronting limitations and responsibilities within partnerships, possibly leading to a reevaluation of long-term commitments. So this Saturn Pisces and Venus conjunction is still echoing. We're still kind of hearing that. Mars is in Pisces and adds an emotional intensity to this eclipse, kind of being in the same sign as Venus, and is kind of acknowledging some imbalance towards how we express ourselves, leading to unsteadiness in how we handle and express ourselves and initiate ourselves and desires with others. Mars is still early in Pisces, which may lead to some confusion, some hesitation, and direct action. Venus sextiles Jupiter in Taurus, the ruler of Pisces, offering solutions, but still is somewhat sluggish and difficult to get towards these possible outcomes. We really have to try to get to a point where we can be as deep into our own experiences and moral authority. We really have to try to get to a point where we can be as deep into our own experiences and moral authority through patience, pleasure, leisure, and discipline of steadiness. Resistance is key to the path forward for tangible results, confronting imbalances in relationships through steadiness and creation towards our own personal goals and wishes in this economic mess. The eclipses in the Aries Libra axis is kind of pointing towards our own awareness of relationships, our own awareness of the relationship that we have with ourselves, how we can kind of acknowledge maybe some of our limitations. So this eclipse is really highlighting a lot of letting go in the sign of Libra, kind of acknowledging, okay, this is maybe the light which we wanted to reflect from the sun that is being dimmed by this eclipse, which is being dimmed by the south node being highlighted in Libra. So we're having to acknowledge, okay, this is maybe my limitations in love, this is my limitation in relationships. You know, the south node is kind of the floor. Sometimes that can be a little bit of an illusion that maybe we're experiencing from past relationships or past experiences, kind of highlighting, okay, maybe this is something that's happened before, but that maybe not actually be the footing which I need to stand on. Maybe this isn't the lowest of the low, but acknowledging maybe this feels a little bit like that, right? Not that eclipses can't be good. Sometimes they can offer a little bit of a window to recognize, okay, this is maybe something I want to change. I want to do something with this. I want to recognize my own limitations in relationships. I want to learn to let go and to hold on within. Being generous with ourselves at the time we wish to happen. Being generous with ourselves and the time we wish things to happen will help us to handle issues of independence, codependence, creating boundaries with ourselves and others. Mutual respect and understanding is the way forward. Our intellect serves us well here. We need to be a little bit more empathetic towards ourselves, empathetic towards our lives, what we wish to establish, and have a little bit more care for the things that maybe fall out, that maybe we have to let go of, and kind of recognizing the endings of some chapters that will allow us to start a new one. This is a aspect, I think it's like kind of like, don't hit me right now. I got some things I gotta do. I'm on some higher living shit. Don't hit me right now. I'm on some higher living shit, taking charge and living my life integrated in my own moral authority, protecting my morals and lifestyle. Venus is kind of like, this is how I wish to live. Maybe I'm not going to acknowledge some of those things that other people want me to abide by. This is kind of their own limitations. Maybe this is their own floor that they expect me to react to, that they expect me to drop down to, or to just establish myself on. And I have to be a little bit more persistent about seeing through that, kind of recognizing maybe through my own experiences what I wish to establish. With the South Node, I consistently talk about it like, it's like when you devour a fish and then you pull it out and you see the skeleton of everything that was there underneath it. So you're kind of seeing, oh wow, this is really that. It's kind of like pulling the mask off something. You're really kind of getting to the, what is this? What does this mean for me? What am I just running towards an illusion, or am I just running towards something that is bad for me? I got to pull this mask off. I got to see what's really there. So with that, it's kind of like we're being occupied with our own understandings of relationships, our own personal needs to let go of expectations that we may place on other people, how other people may not be able to fulfill our needs, but kind of seeing things for what they are, really. Kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty and kind of acknowledging, okay, this is the honest truth. This is my honest ability to create what I can create. And that's not bad, but I need to recognize how that can work for me. I need to recognize that, okay, this is what it is, and move on. To pull the mask off, and once we do pull the mask off, we kind of see maybe the foe that we're dealing with as they are. And when we see that, we have to kind of decide, are we going to just go along with it? Are we going to pretend to not really be integrated into our own kind of selfhood, our own reaction of, wait, I don't align with this. This isn't something I want. Or are we going to deal with it? Kind of acknowledge and say, hey, I don't want this. This is something I don't like. This is something I want to remove. This is something I want to let go of. I need to change some of this. I need to set some boundaries. I need to have a little bit more established understanding of what I like, of what I want to do with my life, of where I want to have relationships go in my life. So on March 28th, we have Venus sextiling Uranus. And this is an interesting aspect. Venus is kind of acknowledging all of these things that we have to deal with, kind of this information that's being presented at our doorstep, the things we have to respond to, the things we need to deal with. And she's kind of like, you know what? I'm riding out of this jungle. I'm starting a new life. I'm doing things my own way. I'm not doing what other people want me to do. I'm escaping the chaos and doing something no one else would want me to do. Bucking the rules, things we can't change, and riding out in a golden chariot. Venus is like, you know what? I'm moving on. I'm letting go of this. I got to get to Aries. I got to get to that conjunction with Neptune. I got to keep going. And this aspect with Uranus and Taurus is highlighting this need to break out, to redefine for ourselves what we want to do. And this is a sextile, so the sextiles are a little bit weaker. So Venus is kind of taking this opportunity, and I think we all should take that opportunity to, just fuck off, get off the internet, do something that gives back to our own time. It's like kind of like fuck everyone and get on the shit that raises you up. Get to that exaltation moment, which Venus will take on at about 27 degrees of Pisces. Yeah, so with this Venus sextile Uranus, Venus is kind of wanting to get away from the relationship dynamics, wanting to touch a little bit more into leisure, wanting to acknowledge, okay, you know what, this is bringing me a lot more pleasure than maybe being fulfilled by this or being fulfilled by this, kind of wanting to go out and touch grass, you know what I mean? Wanting to just say, you know what, I like it a little bit slower, and I need to be integrated into where I can draw pleasure from. I need to be a little bit more integrated in how I want to enact my own pleasure in life. I don't want to just go with the flow. I don't want to be a part of the mix. I don't want to engage with this person because they're going to bring me fulfillment in this way. I want to do this because I don't want to go towards that goal. I don't want to go towards this goal that the culture wants me to have. I want to just do things because it gives me joy, not because I have a monetary reward from it, not because I can put it on my resume, Not because that other people are going to respect me more, but only because it's going to allow me to enjoy the pleasures of my life. So yeah, this is influencing Venus to get outside of her comfort zone in that aspect, not trying to be controlled by the consensus, but being a little bit more integrated in what she wants to experience, being a little bit more invested in, hey, you know what? I don't really care how people see me in this aspect. This is how I want to enact my life. This is how I want to deal with it. So, whatever other people say about this, it doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't really apply to me. Like, everyone lives their life, and that's their own power. I want to cultivate something that helps me learn, something that helps me enjoy life, not just be a part of the machine, not just be a cog in the machine, but kind of let go, kind of let that dissolve, and to introduce something that would establish my own personal security, my own personal foundation, and something that's a little bit more stable. And with Uranus, I think it's kind of acknowledging a little bit of the highs and lows that we experience from Uranus, kind of wanting to, okay, you know what, I can't maybe focus on fixing something permanently, but what I can do is maybe figure out how I can enjoy things regardless. Get to a point where maybe I go on a drive, maybe I just go outside, maybe I go out into the wilderness. I'm not doing something for views online, but I'm just wanting to do things for myself, to kind of reestablish my own pleasure, my own enjoyment that would maybe buck other people's expectations of me. Yeah. All right, so that is the month. We kind of end with a Venus sextile to Uranus, and we start April off with the start of the Mercury retrograde on April 1st, no less. It's going to be funny. Mercury's a trickster. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just got to laugh. You got to see what Mercury's trying to do, what Mercury's trying to cook up, right? So, yeah, I hope to see you next month for April's astrology. It's going to be the ending of the eclipses, so we'll get into that, as well as the Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Taurus with Venus under the beams in Aries. We got the eclipses highlighting both of these months as those big beginnings, those big changes, those big shakeups.